Hello all, welcome to yet another live session of Narayana IAS Academy. So this is Sureka Bhaskar here to present the daily news analysis for you guys. And for today's discussion, of course, we've actually picked up very important articles from The Hindu as well as the Indian Express that become extremely important and relevant for the upcoming examination. Okay, that is your UPSC CSE 2025 examination. So let us actually kickstart our discussion with the motivation. So, what is the motivation for today? What's written behind me is success isn't given, it is earned by your hard work, your persistence, as well as creating your own opportunities. Yes, it is actually said right that success is not served by anybody on a platter for us to just seize it. In the other hand, we'll actually have to work and given all our consistent and persistent efforts and also try to create new opportunities for ourselves. Okay, so this applies to all of us, whether you are an employee, whether you're an employer, you're a student, an aspirant, etc. Okay, so now having said this, let us actually move forward and see what we have in order to ease your preparation for the examination. So Narayana IAS Academy has actually brought forward a one-year prelims cum mains integrated course for the 2026 examination and a two-year prelims cum mains integrated course for the 2027 examination. So the entire duration of this course is 1000 plus hours, where 800 hours are exclusively set aside for your general studies as well as your CSAT, whereas the remaining 200 hours are exclusively given for your current affairs. So this actually is a holistic program, that is a comprehensive program which covers all the three stages of your examination, that is the preliminary, the mains, as well as your interview. Now moving forward, apart from the general material that you will be provided with, we also provide you with the strategic micro schedule, where it is a day wise thematic segregation of the topics that are in your syllabus, so that it enhances your preparation by making you not lose track. Okay, and also to make sure that you are in pace with the subject as well as the syllabus of every subject. And all these subjects will actually be taught to you by our expert faculty who have been to the interview stage of the examination. And in order to provide you personalized feedback and in order to boost your morale, we actually have a regular testing mechanism through our test series as well. Okay, so based on your performance, you can actually introspect how how well you have actually fared when compared to that of your previous performances. So this is actually one of the initiative brought about or brought forward in order to make you ace this examination. So now, without any further delay, let us actually look at the topics that we have picked up for today's discussion. Okay, so the first topic has been picked up from the Indian Express, page number 11, which is wildlife mismanagement. Okay, so this particular article actually talks about the mismanagement of the conservation efforts by the government. Okay, so because of which what happens is that there is a difficulty in addressing the human wildlife conflict. So in this particular article, I have actually picked this up for mains discussion. We'll be discussing about what is this particular concept of human wildlife conflict. Okay, whether it is actually it plays a negative role for both the human beings as well as the wildlife, or it is a negative interaction only for the wildlife or for the human beings. Also, we will see different reasons for this particular human wildlife conflict. For example, whether it is land degeneration or fragmentation, okay, and whether it is because of poaching, as well as the habitat loss, the disasters, etc. Okay, so we'll be looking into the concept of human wildlife conflict. Moving on, we'll be looking into the reasons for this particular human wildlife conflict and different initiatives that have been brought about by the government in order to curb this menace of human wildlife conflict. And also we will be looking at the national human wildlife conflict mitigation strategy 2021 to 2026. Okay, so with this we'll be completing this particular topic. Next topic has actually been picked up from the Indian Express, page number 13, the national board for wildlife, its history, role and the impact. Okay, so this is also an environment and ecology topic where you will actually deal with biodiversity laws, conservation, environmental impact assessment. So in order to oversee the entire process of environmental conservation, you will definitely have some apex body, right? So one such is the National Board for Wildlife. So we'll also look into when it came into existence, whether any kind of amendment of a particular act such as the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, did it take place or not? What are the key objectives and the aim of this particular board, and who is the ex officio chairperson, etc., is what we will discuss here. Now, moving forward, the third article has been picked up from page number 12 of the Hindu, which reads, Center sanctions 116 new tourist spots across the country. So, recently the central government has actually sanctioned around 116 new tourist spots in various places of various states across the country, and that is actually taking place under the Swadesh Darshan Scheme, and also there are different sub schemes under that. So, what is the important topic over here is tourism. Okay, so what is the status of tourism? What is actually the contribution that tourism makes to that of the GDP, and also whether it provides employment or not? All that we will see with respect to the tourism sector. Apart from that, we will look into this particular scheme, that is the Swadesh Darshan Scheme, where it was revamped to make it Swadesh 2.0, and also we will see what are the other initiatives that have been brought about by the government in order to boost this tourism sector in India, like the Prashad scheme, etc. Okay, so now this is also taken for your prelims discussion. The fourth article that has been picked up for today's discussion is actions by the government to business to shape trade resilience for the years UNCTAD. Okay, so this particular article we will be discussing about this United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, that is the UNCTAD. It has come up with a report of 2024 which talks about what are the risks that the global trade actually faces, okay, and how much of resilience it has to have, what are the initiatives or the steps that have to be taken by the government in order to balance the same. All that we'll be seeing, and of course for the prelims discussion we'll be discussing in detail about this particular UNCTAD, okay, United Nations Conference for Trade as well as Development. And finally, this particular article is found on page number 12, I believe, of the Hindu regarding Aditya L1 mission, where what are the key observations of this particular mission, and what are all the components, and also for the first time it has detected the coronal mass ejections, that is flare-less coronal mass ejections. All this we'll be discussing, that is we won't be discussing in detail in this particular lecture. The link of this particular article in which DNA it was covered, that is I think around 1st March it was covered, so the link of which is actually given in the comment section. So these 5 articles very important for discussion today. So with not much delay, let us actually start with the first article, wildlife mismanagement. Okay, so as I told you, here we are going to deal with the human wildlife conflict, and this of course becomes an important part of this topic, that is biodiversity conservation. And of course this is important for both prelims as well as mains, but more significant for the mains examination under GS paper 3, conservation and environmental impact assessment, that is EIA. Okay, so now let us move forward to see what has been the type of questions that UPSC actually asked in the previous year. So in the year 2018, what happened? There was a mains question on biodiversity. How does that actually vary in India, and how is the Biological Diversity Act of 2002 helpful in conservation of flora as well as fauna? So hereby biodiversity conservation on the entire topic is becoming important. Okay, so now let us actually move forward and see why this particular human wildlife conflict has actually been in the news. So human wildlife conflict actually happens to be a significant threat. Okay, so it actually is a major issue in India's wildlife management, and this is actually causing not only harm to the wildlife but also to the human population as well as the settlement. Okay, so first of all, let us see what is this particular human wildlife conflict. It is nothing but the kind of negative interaction which actually occurs between the wildlife as well as the human beings. Okay, so this actually has adverse impacts on both the human beings. Okay, if you see people, there are actually loss of life, there is loss of crop, there's loss of livestock that they actually rear, etc. Whereas the impact that it actually has on the wildlife is the injury or the death of the animals or habitat degradation. Okay. Moving forward, if you see the IUCN World Parks Congress in 2023, it has actually defined the human wildlife conflict. Okay, so it has actually said it is nothing but this human wildlife conflict actually occurs when the needs and behavior of the wildlife impact negatively on the goals of human beings, and also when the needs and the behavior of the human beings that actually impact negatively the goals of wildlife. Okay, similarly, that is what is called as a negative negative what is the interaction, the negative impact that the wildlife have on the human beings and vice versa. And this particular conflict of this human wildlife conflict is actually becoming more and more serious, and it is becoming widespread as the population actually grows, because as the population density increases, people start expanding their territories beyond their settlements, right? So they move into the territory and the corridors of these particular animals, as well as the habitat are getting disrupted. What happens? The instances of human wildlife conflict are actually becoming more frequent. So this is what is called as human wildlife conflict. Now let us see what are few reasons for this particular human wildlife conflict. Of course, habitat loss and the fragmentation is the primary factor that contributes to this particular human wildlife conflict. Okay, because as I told you, there is increase in the population, there is expansion of human settlements for their own purposes, the agricultural purposes, etc. This actually leads to fragmentation of the forest. So the entire forest, certain areas are cleared up for agriculture. So this actually leads to the animals moving into the human occupied zones, thereby resulting in conflicts. For example, if you see the leopards from the Sanjay Gandhi National Park in Mumbai, they actually move into the residential areas or the villages. And also, if you see, only 5% of the geographical area in India are, unfortunately, only 5% is protected, and this is actually very insufficient for the wildlife habitat, for a full-fledged wildlife habitat. Okay, now what is the second one? So first one is habitat loss and fragmentation. The second one is land use transformation. What do you mean by land use transformation? The forested lands are actually transformed into the agricultural lands, as well as other fair or fallow as well as bare lands for the industrial purposes, etc. Okay, and industrial expansion, mining activities, etc. This also leads to the human wildlife conflict. For example, you have the human wildlife conflict, that is a human elephant conflict in Jharkhand as well as Odisha, because of the mining activities that have significantly disturbed the elephant corridors. So first we've seen habitat loss and fragmentation. Second one, we've actually seen the transformation of the land use patterns. Now let us go forward to the third reason. Third reason is the disasters. Okay, so it can be either natural disasters or it can be man-made disasters. So this also contributes significantly to the human wildlife conflict. For example, the floods in Assam. So here it actually made the animals from this Kaziranga National Park to the nearby villages to come out in search of higher grounds and food. Okay, next one, the forest based livelihoods. If you see, the local communities significantly depend on the forest areas as well as the forest produce. Okay, for example, if you see Sundarbans in West Bengal, people actually rely more on fish as well as the forest resources, and thereby it actually contributes to them having a conflict or deadly encounters with the Bengal tigers. Okay, Royal Bengal tigers. So now moving forward, the next one, apart from the land degradation or the fragmentation, the disasters, etc., or the transformation of the land use patterns, the next one is electrocution, road kills, rail kills, as well as infections. Okay, so here it is very clear in order to understand. So according to the Ministry of Environment and Forest Change, around 475, almost 500 elephants have been electrocuted. Okay, by the electric lines. And apart from that, there are also a lot of road accidents, specifically in the highways, and you can also see rail accidents are also very frequent. Okay, where the wildlife actually where the national highways run through the corridors where the animals pass. The next one, the impact of climate change. So rising temperature as well as the shifting patterns of rainfall, the drought, etc. as well, all this affect the food and the availability of water to the animals as well, that is the wildlife. So that actually pushes them in search of food as well as water into the areas which are occupied by the human beings. Okay, so for example, if you see, researchers have actually found bigger, or you can say more frequent instances of human as well as bear encounters in warmer winters. As winters are getting warmer, as well as the formation of snow is getting delayed, what happens? The hibernation, you know about the hibernation and estivation, right? The summer sleep and the winter sleep. The period of hibernation where the bear actually goes off to the rest, what happens? That gets reduced, thereby causing the human animal conflict. Okay, now let us actually move forward and see a few current, or few of the trends or the data with respect to what is the status of human wildlife conflict in India. So from the period of 2019 to 2023, the elephant attacks have caused nearly 2,800 deaths across India, and in Kerala alone, if you see, around 400 or 316 people have lost their lives. Okay, and 3,700 were injured due to wildlife conflicts between 2021 and 24. Also, there have been significant tiger attacks, that is around 300 human deaths have actually taken place in India, and around 75 tigers have also actually died because of poaching as well as unnatural causes. Okay, so these are the statistics of this particular human wildlife conflict in India. Now let us see what are few of the measures for the mitigation of the human wildlife conflict. What you need to do, these are very simple. I told you there were transformation, or in the land use patterns there were a lot of transformation, right? So over there you need to focus on efficient land use planning, where you need to minimize on the habitat overlap between human beings as well as wildlife. Next one, community based natural resource management. So if you can't see this, let me just 1 minute. Yeah, now I think it will be, you will be able to see. Yeah. So here, as I told you, the first one, better land use planning. The next one should be community-based natural resource management, where there has to be empowerment of the local communities for responsible wildlife interaction. And one such example is the crocodile management program that has been taking place in Odisha. Now moving forward, the environmental impact assessment. You need to prevent these infrastructure development in these particular critical wildlife habitats, and also we need to create the early warning and the deterrent systems. That is, we can use buzzers, we can use alarms, etc., in order to prevent the wildlife from approaching the high risk areas such as the railway tracks, etc. The next one is eco bridges and wildlife corridors. So this, the eco bridges will actually facilitate the safe migration of wildlife. Okay, and also you need to do the biofencing. What is biofencing? Growing up of tall trees and shrubs so that they actually don't come onto the road. That is biofencing. Next one, there have to be awareness as well as sensitization programs. So that you can see over here. Yeah, after biofencing, if you see, there are awareness and sensitization programs where you need to educate people on the importance of wildlife conservation. And finally, role of technology. We need to use mobile apps, etc., to track and alert the movement of wildlife. Okay, so these are certain initiatives that have been taken by the government. I mean, we'll have to taken by the government, as well as few of the steps in order to mitigate the human wildlife conflict. Now, let's move on to the next slide. What are the issues in India's human wildlife conflict? We very well know that India is characterized by this particular human wildlife conflict. Okay, and also we know what are all the steps that have to be adopted in order to mitigate this human wildlife conflict. But at the same time, what are the issues that have actually faced by the government in order to implement the same? So first, if you see the methods or the approach that is actually taken up by the government, majority of them are very extreme in approach. Okay, they are mostly reactive in nature than proactive in nature. What do you mean by reactive? Shoot at first sight orders are actually given because of the human wildlife conflict, which should not be done. Okay, instead of that, proactive solutions as well as the long term solutions have to be thought about. And also, if you see the budgetary allocations and the fundings which are actually given for the flagship programs like Project Tiger, Project Elephant, as well as the other programs for development of wildlife habitats, etc., that have to be increased. Okay, but on the contrary, we see that these projects actually see a 23% decline and 20% decline in the budgetary allocation or the funding that they are having. Now, let's move forward. Then, apart from the reactive approaches that the Indian government actually follow, there are top-down approaches. That is, too much of centralization is actually given, where the inclusion of the local communities as well as the other stakeholders are minimized, as well as these environmental strategists, etc., and the experts, that is reduced. Okay, so over centralization also, what happens, it leads to quick approval of the government projects, because without having any kind of restriction, okay, or opposition. So if you see the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, this centralizes the decision making in the government authority itself. Okay, and it does not include the local communities. Next one, there is tranquilization and relocation of the problematic animals. What do you mean by tranquilization? You sedate the animals in order to make them very calm. Okay, so and also there are relocation, you see, right, there are relocation of these Asiatic lions, there are relocation of tigers, etc. So that is done without consulting the affected communities. Okay, next one, you have to follow the successful models, but successful models are not being followed. So one successful model is the wildlife SOS community. So this actually led the conservation in Karnataka very effectively, but these kind of methods actually always remain as exceptions rather than becoming a norm, which actually has to be adopted by all the states. Okay, so this is what it is. So these are some of the issues with respect to human wildlife conflict. Next one, of course, there is shortage of scientific research and data driven solutions. Okay, so there is no central database on the actual number of these instances of human wildlife conflict. So there is limited nationwide data. Next one, the conflict hotspot mapping, that is Kanha Tiger Reserve, but that is, this conflict hotspot mapping is done in this Kanha. Again, where is this location is very important, but then there is no centralized conflict database. Next one is very poor understanding of species specific behavior. So this actually leads to generic one size fits all solutions versus, so what do they actually do is, each kind of species, take it elephant, take it tiger, all these actually have to be studied on their specific behavior rather than formulating one approach and thinking that one size will actually fit all. Okay, so this has to be curtailed, and on the contrary, regionally tailored conflict management strategies have to be brought forward. Okay, so now the next one is also over reliance on protected areas over the coexistence model. So if you see, there is over reliance, that is, if you see the conservation policies that the government actually come up with, no, that is majorly focused on these protected areas. They focus only on protected areas rather than the areas where most of the conflicts occur. Okay, so there are 700 plus protected areas, but significant wildlife actually thrive outside these protected areas only. Okay, so human wildlife conflict becomes inevitable, so they have to focus on the coexistent systems also. Now, the exclusionary PA model, this actually alienates the local communities. Okay, so there is a protected areas model that is actually followed, but that again excludes the communities. And then what happens here, the traditional practices which are actually taken by the indigenous tribes, etc., are foregone. For example, the Mishmi indigenous tribe in Arunachal Pradesh. Okay, next one, This is very important. There is a national human wildlife conflict mitigation strategy and action plan of 2021-2026. This is nothing but it is a guiding framework that has actually been brought by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, okay, in order to focus on the holistic mitigation and also focus on sustainable as well as inclusive approach. Okay, so this is what it is. So it has 5 key parameters. What are they? First one, address the drivers. Whatever actually drives this human wildlife conflict, okay, like you can say the shrinking habitats, the land use changes as well as the resource scarcity. Focus on that first. Next one, reduce the pressure, that is mitigate immediate conflict events through physical barriers, and also you have to bring in force the early warning system and the habitat enrichment. Next, create a central database as well as make an informed decision making. Okay, next one, reducing the negative impacts. Now we need to focus on reducing the loss of life, injury, property damage for both the humans as well as wildlife, and finally strengthening institutions, that is enhancing the financial funds that you can actually give for the institutions and institutional structures for sustained as well as long term implementation. Okay, so this is what is this particular mitigation strategy and action plan. Okay, so with this we've actually understood a huge concept of human wildlife conflict. Okay, so we have actually seen what this particular conflict is about, why this conflict actually occurs, and in this why we have actually seen examples also. And here a good mention is the Kerala Assembly actually passing a resolution with respect to demands that they actually wanted the central government to make, like the amendments in certain sections of the WPA, and also declaring these wild boars as vermins, etc. So these vermins, in which schedule they are, what is the act, all that has already come in your examination. So this is an important area of focus. Okay, so we have actually seen what it is, why it is actually there, and despite the fact we know that this has to be done, what are the key issues that the government or the other agencies are facing with respect to that of the conservation or to avoid it. And then we saw what are the various initiatives that have to be taken for the mitigation of the human wildlife conflict. And finally we ended by discussing this particular national action plan of 2021-2026. Okay, so here we've actually finished a very important topic. Now let's move to the second most important article. Here it talks about similarly National Board for Wildlife, its history, role and the impact. Why this particular article is in the news? Because the Prime Minister recently chaired this particular National Board for Wildlife in 12 years, and this actually happened in Gujarat. Okay, so here this is important for prelims as well as the mains examination under general issues on environment and ecology, as well as GS paper 3 conservation as well as environmental impact assessment. Now if you actually see the previous year question in the year 2011, it talks about which one of the following is not a site for in situ method for conservation of flora. So here different methods of conserving the flora, fauna, all that also becomes equally important. Now moving forward, the Prime Minister has chaired the first full body meeting of the National Board for Wildlife at the Gir National Park, Gujarat. Again, knowing about this national park becomes very important. Okay, now let's quickly jump into the topic and understand about this National Board for Wildlife. Okay, so this was established in 2003 by the amendment that was done to the WPA, that is the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. What is the purpose of this one? It actually acts as an apex body which is responsible for advising on how to formulate your wildlife policy. How does this process of conservation take place, and also establishment of national parks and the sanctuaries in India. Who is the chairperson of this particular national board? It is the Prime Minister of India, who is the ex officio chairperson, and the vice chairperson happens to be the Union Environment Minister. Very important. It in total consists of 47 members, which also includes the government officials, conservationists, ecologists, as well as the non-government representatives as well. So this is all about the National Board for Wildlife. So what are the functions? As I told you, it advises the government on the conservation policies or the strategies. Next one, it oversees the projects which are in and around the protected areas. Okay, so through its standing committee. So this actually mainly focuses on this one. However, you need to know whatever decisions are made by this particular standing committee is not binding on the government. So that is why it is also one of the criticisms. Next one, approves and regulates the national parks, wildlife sanctuaries as well as the protected areas. And next one, assesses the impact of what are the development projects that can actually hamper these particular wildlife as well as the forests. Okay, so these are the functions. At the same time, there are a number of criticisms that this body faces. One is the standing committee decisions are not binding on the government. What do you mean by not binding on the government? When the decisions are actually not mandatorily to be followed or taken up by the government, what happens? The government has the authority to override the decisions that are actually taken by this particular standing committee. Okay. The next one, this particular standing committee has actually cleared number of controversial projects. For example, the Cane Bedpa river linking projects. Okay, so this will actually likely submerge around 100 square kilometers of the Panna National Park, okay, as well as the Tiger Reserve, which is the critical habitat for tigers and other species. The next one, if you see, it has actually allowed oil exploration where in the Holangapar Gibbon sanctuary. So this is actually located where in Assam, and it is home to the Huluk gibbons. Okay, that is the only ape species in India, and hence it actually, the oil exploration and extraction of course will threaten the survival of these species, isn't it? So this is one of the second examples. Next one, denotification of the Galathea Bay sanctuary. Okay, so Andaman and Nicobar Islands for port reconstruction. Okay, so this area there has been denotification from this area from the protected status, but however this actually acts as a major nesting site for the leatherback sea turtles which are endangered. Next one, 2014, this particular national board was restructured, which reduced the participation of the non-government people. Okay, so if there are more government employees which are present there, then of course they will not resist or tell no to the decisions that are taken by the government, right? So that is what it is. It reduced the independent members as well as the NGO participation. It was restructured, appointing few non-government representatives, so it was easier for approvals, okay, even for projects that were environmentally risky and degrading. Next one, let's move forward and see. There was, prior to this national board for wildlife, there was this particular board, okay, that is the Indian board for wildlife. So it was actually initially called as the Central Board for Wildlife and later named as the Indian Board for Wildlife, and the first chairperson of this was Maharaja Jayachamara, what is it, I'm sorry, Jayacham Maharaja. Okay, whatever. This was the Maharaja Wadayar of Mysore. Now moving forward, the role. Here, it actually acts as an advisory body, the similar thing only for wildlife conservation and policy formulation before this particular National Board for Wildlife was actually created. Okay. Now, moving forward, let us actually see what have been the key contributions of this particular Indian Board for Wildlife. Okay. So, it has played an important role in the conservation and the establishment of various projects, like one is Project Tiger in 1973, next one in the enactment of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, and also in the declaration of peacock as India's national bird, which took place in 1961, and the establishment of Gir National Park for conservation of Asiatic lions, and it actually gives a legal backing for wildlife conservation and a regulated wildlife trade. And finally, the first meeting actually took place in Mysore in 1952. Okay, so this is what is the key contribution of this particular body. However, there was actually decline and transition of this particular Indian Board for Wildlife to National Board for Wildlife. Okay, so this IBWL was reconstituted in 1969 under the chair of Karan Singh, okay, in 1977. This was reconstituted, and also Indira Gandhi actually was the chairperson, where they focused on the conservation, especially the Keoladio National Park in 1982, as well as a National Wildlife Action Plan was brought about in 1983. Very, very important. However, after that, since 1988 to 1997, for over a decade, there was no meeting at all. So this actually showed its possible decline. And also the National Board for Wildlife actually then came and replaced the Indian Board for Wildlife in the year 2003 in order to strengthen the conservation efforts of the WPA. Okay, so this is what is the decline story of this one. Now, let's quickly move on to the third article. Center has sanctioned 116 tourist spots across the country. So, this has actually taken place, what to say, under the Swadesh Darshan Scheme. Okay. So, first it's important for us to understand what was this Swadesh Darshan Scheme, when did it come into existence, and then when this particular scheme got revamped to become the Swadesh Darshan 2.0, and what are all the other subcomponents of the scheme, like the challenge based destination development, and then we have the special assistance to the states for central investment. So all these are the sub schemes. This is important for prelims, that is economy, as well as for GS paper 2, government policies and interventions for development in various sectors and issues arising out of the design and implementation. And since it's tourism, how much it contributes to the Indian economy, etc., becomes an important part of GS paper 3 as well. Okay, so now let us move forward and see what has been the previous year question asked in the mains examination in 2019. So, how can the mountain ecosystem be restored from the negative impact of the development initiatives at tourism? So, here the sectors like industries, tourism, fishery, manufacturing, and then shipping, all that becomes very, very important. Okay, and their contribution to the Indian economy, how it is going to environmentally impact, all that becomes important. Okay, now moving forward, let us see. The government has actually sanctioned, I told you, 116 tourist destinations across the country under multiple schemes. One is the Swadesh Darshan 2.0, and the next one is actually the challenge based destination development. That is, various challenges are actually given to different states, and based on the proposals, the states actually compete with each other to get the funds. Okay, that is what it is. Next one is special assistance to the states for capital investment. So all these are different initiatives that are actually brought forward in order to enhance the tourism. So if you see, tourism as a sector, it is actually a major economic driver in India that significantly contributes to GDP, and then be it your foreign exchange earnings, in getting your foreign exchange earnings, as well as generation of employment. If you see in GDP, it contributes to around 6 to 7% to India's GDP, and of course one of the largest sectors where the employment generation takes place, which is around 40 million direct or indirect employment jobs. I mean, jobs are actually created. Next one, foreign exchange earnings, where there are sufficient or significant inflows of the foreign exchange, and this actually enhances the economic stability to an extent. Okay, so this is what is the role of tourism. Now let's quickly see what has been the Swadesh Darshan scheme and when it got revamped to Swadesh Darshan 2.0. Okay, so here it is a flagship program brought about in 2014 in order to develop theme based tourist circuits. You would have heard about the Ramayan circuit, the Sufi circuit, etc., where the areas which are, or the regions which are associated these particular religion, etc., actually have a connected way or an interconnected tourism network. So this is what it is, and then it got revamped to Swadesh Darshan 2.0 with greater focus on sustainability. Earlier it was just focusing on the circuits and on the theme, but later it focused on the sustainability and the destination development also. Here they started focusing on individual destinations than the entire circuit. Next, key provision is that sustainable tourism development. We of course know that, right? So you need to carry on the carrying capacity assessment of, as well as responsible tourism practices. So apart from enhancing tourism, you need to focus on sustainability as well as the environmental factors that are related to this as well. Next one, theme-based circuits. This also promotes heritage, ecotourism and the tribal tourism circuits. It actually has digital infrastructure where the ticket booking as well as online tourism services are available. And the next one is state-led implementation, where the states can also participate in the project execution. So this is what is Swadesh Darshan 2.0. Next one, theme-based circuits. As the name suggests, okay, it focuses on historical sites or the forts as well as palaces, and also there is spiritual tourism. Here there is development of Buddhist, Ramayana as well as Sufi circuits. Next one, ecotourism and wildlife circuits is also there, where the tourism for the biosphere reserves and tourism to national parks has actually been introduced. Next one, tribal and the tourism circuits, where the tribal culture is further promoted through the homestays as well as the community tourism. The next one is the challenge based destination. I told you this is also a sub scheme of Swadesh Darshan 2.0, where this focused on destination centric approach, where you develop high potential destinations rather than focusing on the entire circuit. Competitive selection between the states are there, and also tourism experience enhancement is there, where you focus more on the infrastructure, the safety as well as cleanliness, the branding as well as digital integration. Okay, so this is what it is. Now moving forward, let us actually see the special assistance for states for capital investments. Okay, that is the SASCI. So this is actually aimed at elevating for, see, they've actually select 40 iconic destinations, okay, and they want to raise these destinations to global standards by providing financial assistance to the state government. So this is what this special assistance to states for capital investment is all about. Now moving forward, the objectives is of course actually having a world class tourism, so world class infrastructure. Next one, there has to be a global branding as well as marketing, okay, so that you bring India as one of the top tourist destinations on the global stage. Next one, sustainable development. At the same time, you actually focus on green as well as eco-friendly tourism as well. So this is what is the objectives of this particular scheme. Next one, if you see, what is the difference between the previous Swadesh Darshan 1.0 and 2.0? This was circuit based, whereas this was destination based. This actually main focus was on infrastructure development, but here it was sustainability and the carrying capacity assessment. Next one, this actually was more centralized, okay, where the state governments were very less or meager in their involvement, but here it was state led, so decentralization was here. The tourism management, it actually, there was limited focus on sustainability, but here there was ecotourism and responsibility to responsible tourism was integrated. The final one, digital integration, here it was minimal, but here smart tourism as well as virtual experience are also being provided. Okay, so these are the various schemes under which the tourism, the tourism sector, I mean the different 116 tourism locations have actually been included under the previous schemes. Now, what are the other initiatives? One was this Prasad initiative. This is nothing but pilgrimage rejuvenation as well as spiritual augmentation drive. So this is Prasad, okay. So this actually enhances the infrastructure facilities at the pilgrimage sites in India. Next one, Incredible India, you know that ad, right? So here it is a digital first branding and marketing initiative in order to promote the Indian destinations. The next one, Dekho Apna Desh. This actually encourages domestic tourism. This is, as the name suggests. The next one, National Mission on this Prasad. This expands this particular Prasad by integrating the heritage and religious tourism as well. Okay, so this is what it is. And apart from this, the others actually include Adopt a Heritage, where it is a corporate social responsibility driven initiative, where these corporates, as a part of their CSR, that is corporate social responsibility, have to maintain as well as improve the heritage monuments. The next one is Hunar Se Rozgar Tak. This is skill development program of the youth for the jobs in this particular tourism sector. And next one is MICE, that is nothing but meetings, incentives. Then you have conferences and exhibitions. Okay, so this tourism promotion aims to make India a global hub for business as well as event tourism. Okay, so this is what this particular article talks about. Now let us see the last article: actions by governments, businesses to shape the trade resilience for years. So, UNCTAD, this is nothing but the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, has actually come up with a report 2024, which actually talks about the risks that the global businesses actually face, and to that, what are the actions that have been taken by that have to be taken by the governments and the businesses in order to boost the resilience of trade. Okay, so here UNCTAD as an organization becomes important, as well as the 2024 Trade and Development Report, very important for both the prelims as well as the mains examination. Now moving forward, if you see the prelims questions, the Global Competitiveness Report is published by which of the following? So if they actually give you the particular Trade and Development Report, that is actually an initiative by who? That is whether it's UNCTAD, it's a World Bank, WEF, etc. You need to know the answer. Now moving forward, let us see what the article is talking about. So, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, that is UNCTAD, has actually warned about global trade uncertainty that is actually happening, that is increasing. So here it has said that there is a need for international cooperation in order to prevent this particular economic fragmentation. Okay, so this is what the UNCTAD has actually told. Now let us see what is UNCTAD. It is actually established, it was established in the year 1964 by the United Nations General Assembly, headquartered at Geneva, Switzerland. Nature is advisory in nature. Of course, non-binding recommendations. Okay, very important. Is India part of it? India was actually a founding member of UNCTAD and has also had a number of benefits from the decisions UNCTAD had actually taken. The objective is to promote sustainable and inclusive trade, everything about trade, investment, finance, as well as technology transfer in the developing nations. What are the key focus areas? Of course, trade and development. Of course, investment and enterprise. Investment means it actually includes the foreign direct investment, that is the FDI, and the enterprise growth in the developing economies. Next one is technology and innovation, that is there have to be digital transformation. And next one is macroeconomics and development policies. That is what it actually monitors how this the debt crisis is going on, how the inflation across different countries in the world is actually going on, and what are the global economic trends is what this particular body actually monitors. Also, if you see the structure, the conference meets every 4 years in order to set the policy direction. That's what I told you, in order to monitor the inflation, what should be the global inflation, and how much should be the debt to GDP ratio, and also what are all the policies that different countries actually have to adopt is what it will meet and decide. Next, of course, there's a trade and development board. This actually governs the work that is actually done between conferences. And finally, you have a secretariat which conducts the research, policy analysis, as well as technical cooperation. Now, let us move forward and see what are the major reports that are published by UNCTAD. Extremely important. Of course, trade and development report, it talks about what is the economic trends and the developmental challenges that the trade actually faces across the globe. Next one, world investment report. So it actually talks about what is the FDI inflow of a particular country from the outside world. Okay, so this is what it is. Technology and innovation report, of course, talks about what were all the technological advancements and their impact on the development. Next one, digital economy report. This actually talks about e-commerce and what is the extent of digital trade as well as online services. Next one, review of maritime transport. You can actually think, yeah, it talks about only trade and development. Does it include the maritime transport also? Of course, it actually analyzes the status of the shipping industry trends, the trade logistics and the global shipping routes. And finally, the least developed countries report. This talks about what are all the various economic challenges that the LDCs, that is the least developed countries, are actually facing, and also suggest the solutions. Okay, so this is what is the are the major reports that are published. India and UNCTAD, of course, India is a founding member, as I already told you, and also UNCTAD supports the India's trade, policy formation, the investment strategies, as well as technology transfer initiatives. And India, as I told you, has also benefited from UNCTAD's research on digital economy, maritime transport, sustainable development, etc. And also, UNCTAD recognizes and looks at India as an emerging leader in the South-South cooperation, especially in trade as well as investment. And finally, the reports like World Investment Report track the FDI inflows into India. Okay, so this is what actually gives us a major highlight. What are the key highlights of the 2024 report? It has actually said there has been a global economic slowdown. Okay, that is the global GDP growth, if you see, that actually forecasted at 2.7 for 2024. 2025, which is actually below the pre-pandemic level. And also the developing economies growth has actually declined from 6.6 to 4.1 in the past decade. Next one, rising debt levels are there. If you see specifically in the developed countries, the debt levels have actually increased by 15 percentage points over 4 years. Okay, so if you have higher debts, in order to repay that, if you borrow, what happens? There are increasing interest rates also, because of which you cannot pay your debts back also. And also there is currency depreciation. So all this actually gives an increased debt servicing cost. Okay, so when you want to service your debts, the servicing costs are actually more. Next one, structural changes in trade are there. That is, there is a stagnation in the merchandise trade growth, and services trade is gaining importance. That is, goods and services, goods are actually becoming, focused less, whereas the services are increasing. And also, if you see, trade to GDP ratio has flattened since 2008-2009 financial crisis. Also, there are opportunities in the south-south trade, whereas the trade between the developing countries has doubled between the period of 2007 to 2023. Followed by that, there is high demand for the critical minerals, and there are also various policy recommendations like the economic diversification, that is focused beyond manufacturing. Okay, next one, multilateral cooperation should be there, and there have to be significant debt reforms. Okay, so these are all the key highlights of the report. And also, I've actually discussed about the ISRO's Aditya L1 mission on March 1st. So March 1st, if you actually see our DNA discussion, you would see that we would have discussed about ISRO's Aditya L1 mission. Okay, so here you need to know what is this particular mission, how it is actually important for us to study the sun, why you need to read the sun, read about the sun, and also what do you mean by these flareless coronal mass ejection. Okay, and also what are all the different payloads which are a part of it, and what are all the global initiatives that are actually taken forward in order to study the sun. And this particular mission, that is the Aditya L1, is placed in L1. That is meant, what to say, that means that it is placed in Lagrangian point 1. Okay, so what do you mean by Lagrangian points? All these things you need to know. Okay, so here we've actually covered all the topics. Now let's quickly see one of the main practice question. This talks about human-wildlife conflict remains a significant issue in India, in India's wildlife management. Examine what are the causes and the gaps in government's mitigation framework, and also suggest measures. Okay, so here you need to talk about what do you mean by human-wildlife conflict, and what is actually the definition that is given by the IUCN Congress, IUCN World Parks Congress in 2023. And towards the body, you need to discuss about the major causes: habitat loss and land use because of deforestation, mining, urban expansion, industries, etc. Also, we have the climate change and the disasters, and also poaching as well as the infrastructure. So all these are the major causes. However, there have to be, in order to plug the gaps in the management, there have to be certain measures like community engagement, and there has to be early warning systems, scientific data mapping, and climate resilience strategies. All these have to be there. Okay, so this is actually the approach answer. And towards the conclusion, you will talk about a proactive, scientific, and a community inclusive approach is important for conservation of wildlife as well as the human safety. Now, let us see, there are few questions which are based on today's discussion. Okay, so the first one is, Consider the following with respect to UNCTAD. We have actually discussed about it, you should know. So all these you should solve going to visiting our website, okay? So in order to know that you how much you've actually focused on today's lecture, these actually have to be solved on our website, the link of which is given below in the comment section. So first question is on UNCTAD. The second one will be on Swadesh Darshan 2.0 scheme, whether it's a revamped scheme, it actually focuses on circuits or not, and so on. And finally, you will have the National Board for Wildlife. Consider the following statements, whether Prime Minister is there, the decisions are binding or not of the standing committee, all those things. Now, let's move forward and solve three questions that were discussed in the previous day's DNA. The first question, cost push inflation occurs when aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply. No, when the demand is more than the supply, then it is called as demand pull inflation. So this is not cost push inflation, whereas cost push inflation is affected by the increase in the price of the goods. That is, there are supply level constraints, increase in the price of manufacturing, etc. Okay, so this is wrong. Next one, demand pull inflation is caused by increase in production costs. No, this is actually reversed, right? So this is also wrong. And inflation erodes the purchasing power of money. Yes, it does erode the purchasing power of money. So only the third statement is correct. So your answer is option B. Now let us actually move forward. Yeah, with reference to the APAR ID, consider the following. It is a 12-digit unique academic identity number brought by MeitY. No, it is not by Ministry of Electronics and IT. It is by Ministry of Education. So first statement is wrong. Next one, it is linked to Aadhaar card, which is mandatory requirement. No, it is not mandatory. The problem itself is that the CBSE schools are making it mandatory for the students to furnish this, but it is not mandatory legally. Next one, it is voluntary for the students. Yes. So here also only 3 is correct. So your answer is option C. Next one, the last question for the day is which of the following statements correctly describe fortified rice? So it is a rice enhanced with micronutrients like iron, folic acid, vitamin B12 and vitamin A to address malnutrition. Exactly, it is correct. Next one, the primary goal of this is to combat protein deficiencies. No, it is micronutrients. So second one is wrong. Next one, the fortification process alters the taste, the texture and the appearance of rice. No, this is wrong. It does not alter any of this. So only statement 1 is correct. So again, your answer will be option B. Okay. So I think this is it. Yeah. So with this, we've actually come to the end of our daily news analysis session. I hope you enjoyed it. For more such interactive sessions and for your prelim-centric approach, please do keep following us, like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. We'll actually come up with more informative content. Okay. So thank you. We'll meet you in the next live session.